Hello and welcome to Meeple University How to Play Empires of the Void 2. In Empires of the Void 2, 2 to 5 players attempt to earn victory points by spreading influence and gaining territory throughout the fringe of the galaxy. The winner is the player with the most victory points, symbolised by the flag icon, and the game plays until the power deck runs out of cards. There will be 2 main scoring rounds triggered by the power deck. Victory points are gained by researching technologies and building buildings from the player's player board, and by conquering territories or spreading diplomatic influence to the planets in the system. There are also endgame objective cards and some other ways of scoring points during the game. I won't go through the full setup, but a couple of quick notes. Depending on the number of players, certain planets take a Sarkeen Regency token. This is essentially a thematic way of blocking that planet out for a lower player count. The power deck is assembled using all the power cards and 1 event card each from the planets which are not blocked out by Sarkeen Regencies, and layered approximately halfway into this deck is the intermediate scorecard. Each player has a player board associated with his or her faction. The player board contains spaces for buildings to be built onto the world ship, 6 different technologies, 2 of which are common to every faction and 4 of which are mostly unique, 3 different types of buildings, cities, bases and academies which can be built during the game, and tracks representing the 3 major resources required for performing actions during the game. The top track represents money or credits. These are the Kickstarter exclusive metal coins. They're cardboard coins with the base game. Power cards, which are the cards that you draw from the pack during the game. These either have a text action which can be performed during the game, or a number ranging from 1 to 4, which can be spent as power in battle or to perform certain actions. And the command track, command of which must be spent in order to do movement and some other actions in the game. As you build buildings, you will increase the availability of these resources. And all buildings that are built and technologies that are researched are worth victory points in the scoring rounds. As the final stage of setup, each player draws 2 Empire cards representing secret objectives which can be scored during the scoring phases. Discard 1, and then in reverse turn order, place their starting units, the world ship, a starfarer and a star sloop, on one of the 6 space nodes on the board. At the start of each round of play, one player takes the active player token. That player then chooses the action for the round by placing the action token on it. The token cannot be on the same action in consecutive rounds. If there are still credits on the board, which are placed there only during setup, the active player takes those credits into his or her supply. The active player then takes the action that the token was placed on. Then each other player in turn order may do one of 3 things. Take the same action, take the refresh action, or pay 2 command to take any one of the other actions. After each player has taken a turn, the active player token passes to the player to the left, and another round is played in the same way. The first action I'll talk about is research and build, which takes place mostly on your player board. Researching involves taking goods tokens, of which you start with 1 and collect more through the game, and using them to either research your technologies or fill spaces on the building tracks. To research a technology, choose the technology you want, take the correct sort of goods token, and place it on that space. This won't give you an immediate victory point, but it gives you a victory point in the scoring phases, and it gives you a bonus or ability that you can take from this point forward. When researching a technology, you'll cover a power an amount of power, which has to be paid in power cards at the end of the round. You can research as many technology types as you want in your turn, as long as you have the goods and the power cards to pay for it. The other thing you can do with the research action is place a goods token on a building track. The building tracks start empty, and so the first one can take any type of goods. But once you've placed a certain type of goods in a row, for example metal here, you cannot place a different type of goods in that track, nor can you place that metal in a different type of track. This is now the metal track, and these will require one of the other types. You can place as many goods tokens on your turn in the building track as you want. The building action involves choosing one of the 3 building types, paying its costs in credits, and placing that building on the board. The cost in credits is equal to the sum of all visible red bordered credits here. So this one would cost 7, but these goods tokens are covering up these 2s, so the base would cost only 3 credits. Pay the 3 credits to the bank and take the building. The building can be built in one of 2 places. Into these spaces representing your world ship, so placing this here would represent building a base on your world ship. Again, there is a power cost for doing this. Or alternatively, it may be played onto the board, onto a planet where you have a control cube and where there is no existing building. This one would not be allowed as there is a building there, but it could be played here or here. It does not matter whether you have units in that location or not. Once again, you can perform as many build actions as you can afford, and you can come back and continue doing research actions before building a subsequent building. At the end of your turn, count up the total power cost of anything that you have, any technologies or world ship bases that you've built, and pay that cost in power cards. You can overpay the total power cost, but you cannot spend a power card that's not necessary to meet the total cost. Buildings may be built onto the world ship spaces in any order. Other than opening up spaces on the income and command tracks, cities and academies have no effect in play. Bases give you a benefit during battle. If another player later takes over a planet with your building on it, the building stays in place, and in the case of bases, the new incoming player may use that base. Once goods have been used in technology or building tracks, they are there for the rest of the game and cannot be removed by you or any other player. Unused goods can potentially be removed by other players through some cards, and only these goods may be used in Empire cards such as this, relating to owning goods. The next action is card action or diplomacy. This is the primary way of getting influence markers onto planets. This action allows one of 3 different actions to be taken exactly once in the turn. The first type of action is to play a card action. That is a card with the word action here. Discard this card, pay the cost. In this case, it would be to move to command. The book contains a full description of all the types of costs, and then follow the text on the card before discarding it. You cannot play mission or delivery cards in this phase of the game. These are triggered differently. Different sorts of costs which might be paid for a certain action card can range from nothing, command, credits, presence, meaning you must have a unit on or in orbit of the planet on the card. Control cubes and buildings do not count as units. Discarding power cards, or various other things which may be listed in text. The second option is to take an event action. For any face-up event cards, and I'll explain how event cards come into the game later, if there is an action with this icon here, that action may be taken as part of the card action or diplomacy action. The third option is diplomacy. To play diplomacy, discard any number of power cards that you wish. 1, 2, 3, whatever. Roll one die, and if the number on the die is equal to or less than the sum of the numbers on the power cards discarded, place one influence on any planet of your choice. Small or uninhabited planets cannot have influence markers, neither can large planets with the Sarkeen Regency token. When you place influence on a planet, if you then have the most influence of any player, you take the allied token for that planet, and you take the allied alien unit tokens for that planet. The ally token gives you a bonus which comes into effect immediately, and the allied alien units can be recruited later during the recruit action. If you place influence onto a planet where somebody else has influence, and you have the same amount of influence as that player, you do not claim the ally token. That remains with the player who held it first. But you would both score the victory points associated with that planet in a scoring phase, in this case 3. However, if you put further influence and exceed that of the player who has the ally token, you immediately take the ally token from that player, giving you the bonus, and you take any unrecruited alien units from that player into your collection. The next action is recruit. In recruit, players spend credits to bring new units into their empires. Units available to players are their starting units associated with their factions, which are Starfarers and Starsloops, any alien units associated with planets for which the player holds the ally token, and if player has the recruit warbots technology, they can also bring warbot units into play. The unit's cost in credits is shown in the top corner, and the unit's battle statistics, as well as any powers associated with alien units, is shown in the bottom. This reference card also shows all of the powers for the different alien units. Choose the units that wish to be recruited, spend the full cost in credits, and introduce them into play. The new units may either go onto a large or small planet space which contains the player's control cube and a building, or into the space with the player's world ship. Additionally, the active player, and only the active player, doing the recruit action may draw 2 new empire cards, look at them, keep one, and discard one. The next action is move and attack, and there are a lot of specific rules relating to this. First, let's review the regions on the board. There are large inhabited planets, each of which has a surface region and an orbit region. There are small uninhabited planets, each of which is a single surface region. There are 6 space node regions, which are simply a point in space where nothing exists. There are wormholes, which are adjacent to each other for movement purposes. And there is the trade ship. All of these regions are connected by various space links. Some of these links contain hazards, asteroids, mines, and space monsters. These hazards are not regions by themselves, they occupy part of the link. Each player has 2 types of starship unit available, the world ship and starsloops, and a variety of square-shaped units which represent starfarers, aliens, and so on. These square-shaped units can exist on the surface or in orbit of planets, but they cannot exist in space or move through space without being carried by one of the starships. There is no limit to the number of units which can be carried by a single starship. To perform the movement action, create a group of units from a single region and then move them around the board as many spaces as you want, spending 1 command for each time you move out of a region. Move along the space paths shown on the board. When a group enters and then leaves a space containing more of that player's units, the player may freely pick up units and add them to the group. However, units may not be dropped off until movement is ended. When entering an inhabited planet, a player may choose to place the group on either the orbit space or the surface space. They are both considered adjacent to the spaces around the board. Additionally, a player may spend one command to move from the surface to the orbit or from the orbit to the surface. Players may freely enter or pass through orbit or space regions containing other players' units. When attempting to cross a space link containing a hazard, the player spends the command to move and then rolls a die. If the player meets or exceeds the number printed on the board, the player continues through to the destination. If the number were lower, the player would return to the initial point, but may freely spend another command to try again. The player may spend one command to move the group from one wormhole to the other. There are certain actions in the game, such as battle, deliveries, and some others, which trigger at the end of movement. If a player wishes to perform that action with a unit in its current location, the player must spend one command without moving that unit in order to trigger the end of movement action. If you end your movement on an uninhabited planet with no other player's control cube, you may immediately claim it. Place your control cube, take the goods token into your hand, and flip the explore token. The explore token gives you a bonus as long as you hold this planet. If you end your turn in orbit around one of the inhabited planets, take the goods token and add it to your collection. If you end your turn invading the surface of a large planet, and it does not have another player's control cube, you must battle the local aliens. Firstly, remove any influence markers that you have on that planet from play. This doesn't stop you from adding more later, but they must come off when you invade the planet. Then fight a battle against one of the aliens from that planet. If successful, place your control cube on that planet, take the goods token from the surface as well as any goods token left in orbit. If you're unsuccessful, retreat according to the normal rules of battle. If you end your move on a planet which is controlled by another player, but is not defended by any of that player's units or bases, you can simply take over that planet, replacing the other player's control cube with yours. If this occurs on an inhabited planet, remove any influence that you have there. If you finish your turn on the surface of a planet which is controlled by another player and is protected by either units or bases, you must battle that other player for supremacy of the planet. Again, remove any influence markers that you have on that planet. The winner of the battle will take control and the loser will retreat. If you end your move in an orbit or space region with another player's units, you may choose to battle that other player, but it is not compulsory. If you end your move in the trade ship, you may choose to pay 2 credits to draw 2 random goods from the goods bag and take them into your collection. The second half of the move and attack action is to initiate battle, that is to attack. The steps of attack are listed on this help card here. In each battle there is one attacker who has moved into the region and one defender. Each of the players chooses 3 units, up to 3 units to involve in the battle. Additionally, any bases that player controls come into the battle without contributing to that unit limit. World ships count as units, although they have no power in battle unless the player has placed bases on their world ship through the game. So each player chooses 3 units. In this case, World Ship, Starfarer and Cyborg Outcast versus these 3 units and a base. Next, each player rolls dice according to the number of dice shown on their chosen units. So this world ship with 2 bases plus these gives the blue player 5 dice. This player with a star sloop and 2 starfarers would roll 4 dice. Each player takes the highest number rolled and adds it to the sum of power on all of their units. So this one has a starting power of 3 plus 2 for the 2 bases on the world ship, giving them 5, plus 6 is 11. This player has a starting position of 2 plus 1 for the base, giving 3, plus 5 gives 8. So at this point it is 11 versus 8. Then each player must take 1 power card from his or her hand and play it into the battle. Players may only refuse this if they have no power cards. Each player places the card, simultaneously face down, and then flips them over. The power total on the card is added to the total counted before. So in this case, 8 plus 4 gives 12 total power, and in this case 11 plus 2 gives 13 total power. The player with the higher power wins, and in the event of a tie, the defender wins. The winner of any battle, whether attacking or defending, gains 1 victory point immediately. If the attacking player won, the attacking player takes control of the planet, placing his or her control cube on that planet. The loser, whether attacking or defending, must retreat from the region that they're in to either the nearest controlled region, or if no such regions exist, into the nearest space node. The winning player discards the power card used in the battle. The losing player may either take that card back into hand or may discard it and take a new card. When attacking the aliens on a planet, battle proceeds the same way, except you're fighting exactly one of that alien unit. The alien's dice and power is shown there, and a random card is drawn off the top of the power deck to represent the alien's power draw. The Sarkane Regency can also be attacked in the same way when invading one of its planets. The Sarkane Regency is an order of magnitude more difficult to defeat than any of the other alien races, but if you succeed, you get 2 additional victory points for the battle, so 3 instead of 1, and you still get to place your control cube on that planet. When defeating the Sarkane Regency on a large planet, the Regency token is flipped down to indicate it's been defeated. On a small planet, the token is simply discarded, and a control cube is placed down. The final action is Scavenge, and Scavenge allows the active player to take the refresh action. If the active player chooses Scavenge, other players need only spend 1 command instead of 2 if they wish to perform one of the other actions. To do the refresh action, players do all 3 of the following steps. They take credits equal to the highest number visible on their city track, redraw power cards up to the total hand limit of the player, and reset the command track to the top. At this point, players need to look through the cards they've drawn. If they've drawn an event, which is any power card without the number in a circle, that event comes into play. It's placed on the relevant planet, and it has either an effect or an action which any player can use from that point forward. The player then draws another card to get back up to their hand limit. Events also come into play in that way if drawn for any other reasons, such as by a neutral alien in battle. There are 2 other types of power cards, missions and deliveries. Each mission has a trigger and a reward. At any point during your turn when you meet this trigger, play the mission card and claim the reward immediately. If 2 missions trigger from the same action, only one mission card may be played. The other one needs to be triggered again later in order to be played. Delivery cards give players a pick up and deliver objective, which is worth victory points. When a player ends movement on the pickup location, either in orbit or on the surface, the player plays the card out of hand and takes a cargo token and places it on the unit. Then, when that unit moves to the destination and ends its movement there, again either in orbit or on the surface, it delivers the cargo and the player immediately takes the benefits shown. If that unit is attacked in transit by another player, the player may choose to steal the delivery card and cargo from the losing player. Each player may only have one active delivery and one cargo token on any of its units at a given time, and if choosing to steal cargo from an opponent when already having one delivery active, one must be discarded. Scoring occurs twice during the game. The first scoring is triggered by each player separately by playing the colonization card. However, when the score card comes out about halfway through the power deck, all players are required to play their colonization cards by the end of that round. This gives players a little bit of flexibility to play this early if they hold a strong position and are worried about losing it. Additionally, after scoring off the colonization card, each player may pay 2 credits to draw 1 Empire card from the deck and may recruit 1 unit at its normal cost. The end of the game is triggered when the final card is drawn from the power deck. At that point in time, the power discard is shuffled, returned, and play continues until the active player marker has passed around to the first player and then again to the last player. So there could be as many as 7 or 8 turns after the endgame is triggered. After the 4th player has been the active player for the final time, the game ends and scoring is completed again. In each of the major scoring rounds, score 1 point for each technology which has been built, 1 point for each flag revealed on the building tracks. Some technologies will give you extra victory points, although there are no examples on this board. On the main board, gain the victory points shown for any planets where you have your control cube. Gain the ally points shown for any planet where you have the most or equal most influence. This is a friendly tie, so both players would get 3 points in this case. Note that there are some exploration tiles and other bonuses which will give you additional victory points. And finally, any of your Empire cards which you have met, gain the victory points shown on those. These are not discarded in intermediate scoring and can be scored twice during the game if you meet the objective at both scoring rounds. There are no additional victory points for leftover credits, goods, or units on the board. Highest number of victory points wins. In the event of a tie, the player with the most units wins, followed by the player with the most influence, followed by the player with the most credits.